The only apple and pear who ever got along were Bright Macintosh and Pear Butter.
Psst. I'm not supposed to talk to you.
I'm not supposed to talk to you either.
How do babies work? For the longest time, a reoccurring mystery in the series was the absence of Applejack's parents. We learned over time that they died, but we never actually learned about how it happened. It was never even something that was ever discussed within the show. And because of this, we never got a chance to learn about what kind of people her parents were like, or how their deaths affected their families. Every other member of the main six has had their parents show up in some form, but the Apple parents are the only ones not given any growth due to their deceased state. But that all changed when the episode The Perfect Pear came on the air. And let me tell you, this episode is not only amazing, it's impressive. I don't even think I have the right words to properly describe how well done it is. It just feels like a perfect episode in every single aspect. From the story layout to the way that it adds more background to the characters. I originally wanted this to be thought of as a review, but I decided that that wouldn't be appropriate enough to truly explain why this episode is so amazing. One day, Apple Bloom is traveling across town when she comes across an old man named Pear, who offers her some pear jam. Moved by his generosity, she takes it back home where she learns that a long-going feud has been happening between the apples and the pears. Unfortunately, the siblings don't know anything due to Granny being too upset to talk about it. So the three travel back to Goldie Delicious to learn more about the feud. It's here that they learn that their mother was a pear who fell in love with an apple, and they can only find out more about them through the people who knew them personally. And so begins their journey to learn about the story of their parents, which would take them all across Ponyville as they learn more about themselves, their parents, and their friends that they never knew before. The first great thing about this episode is how smoothly it's paced. There's a natural flow in how the apples travel from person to person and listen to the stories about their parents and how they grew so close to each other. Every moment is used to establish the siblings learning about the family feud and how it affected their parents. And it's done very responsibly. The way the siblings go from person to person makes the overall narrative feel better connected together, using each of the characters to help build up its events and backstory. Each scene is given the precise amount of time it needs to explore the history of Bright Mac and Pear Butter, which allows the episode to further the story in an organic manner. And the concept of the siblings learning more about their parents from people who knew them while they were alive creates a natural and relatable tone that immerses the audience into what the characters are talking about. They're not just learning about their parents, they're learning about how these other people knew them too. The episode shows what kind of influence the two lovers had on their lives, bringing them back to a place of nostalgia. Hearing all these good memories they had with them and listening to the way they talk about them has a raw sense of emotion to it. There's both happiness and sadness in their tone, which helps to show how close they were to them and how their untimely death affected them. Even the way they progressively open up due to how hard it is for them to go back to something like this makes their time with the Apple siblings feel much more meaningful. And it makes the friendships they developed with their parents more meaningful too. The episode also gives us more depth and insight on the backgrounds of several of these characters because of how they talk about how they knew the Apple parents so well. We learn more about how Mrs. Cake lived her life while she was young and single, learning her original name and how she became an experienced baker with Pear Butter's help, and how she developed her friendship with her and Bright Mac. We see how the mayor was acquainted with the two and Mrs. Cake, and how she was the one that wedded them. Learning more about these two and how they knew their parents and how it connects them with their kids creates a deeper connection between the five that's pretty sincere. We also see in several ways how the siblings are similar to their parents. Their honesty, ability to help others, and shy feelings were passed down to them somehow. But instead of being something like a gene or a DNA code, it feels as if they've naturally grown up to be like them considering their experiences. It's like pieces of their parents are still alive within them, which while gimmicky still fits the tone of the story appropriately. Speaking of the story, the first thing that people may recognize about it is how it's similar to Romeo and Juliet. It is about two lovers trying to establish a relationship despite their feuding families. What actually makes it work for this episode is exactly how it establishes the Romeo and Juliet formula. Instead of just copying the formula, it feels like it's continuing the formula. Because of the setup of the story focusing on the siblings learning about their parents and seeing the parents connecting via flashback, it gives us an entirely different way of seeing being the Romeo and Juliet story. It's structured differently, which makes the romance between Bright Mac and Pear Butter easier to appreciate. It explores the lives of these lovers and how they grew so close together, and it never even goes into the cause of their death. The focus isn't on the tragedy of the situation, but on all of the good times and happy memories they shared with each other, and how their love affected the lives of those involved. And because the episode never talks about what happens after they got married and had children, it allows them to implement their unfortunate death without having to actually say anything about it. It's a very clever way for the episode to comment on the topic of death and loss while keeping a consistent tone. It's even subtly hinted at with Granny Smith and Grandpa Pear still mourning over the death of their kids, and the guilt that they feel over how their selfish arguing got in the way of their happiness. Grandpa Pear even comes across as a very nice character because of everything we see of him in the episode. He feels guilty about leaving his daughter behind, and you can probably imagine how traumatized he must have been hearing about her death. He cut her out of his life out of stubborn pride and wasn't even a part of hers at the time of her death. There is so much that could have happened to him to completely break him, but he still finds the spirit to come back years later, pursuing a chance to make up for that mistake. He's voiced by William Shatner, and he does an amazing job adding raw emotion to this character, both as a stubborn farmer and as an old man who's lived his life and wants to find closure in his feud with the apples. He speaks in a calm and welcoming tone, and he finds solace in getting a chance to get to know his grandchildren. Even after all of that, there's still so much to talk about. The romance between Bright Mac and Pear Butter is exceptionally executed. The episode puts time into building up their relationship, showing how they met, how they got along, and how their friendship developed into something special. They were good friends who became a close couple who relied on and supported each other. It focuses on who they were and why they fell in love, which helps to develop their characters. And there's something about watching all of this knowing that they're gonna die later on that makes the emotions of the episode feel so much more compelling and effective. They were so happy together, they were supposed to live full lives, raising a family, growing old, and seeing their children grow up. Maybe if they lived longer, they would have helped Grandpa Pear see things differently a lot sooner. The story does also focus on a feud and how it drove them away from their families. They probably would have convinced the Pears to return to Ponyville and get them to work together with the apples if they were given a chance. But fate didn't give them that chance. All that's left is memories of who they were and what difference they made while they were alive. On one hand, it feels so unfair that such a happy couple wasn't given a chance to live full lives together. But on the other hand, it has a real poetic feel to it, and it makes the episode all the more inspired. And the song that Pear sings is an amazing song. The instrumentals of the acoustic guitar are comforting and gentle, and they complement the passionate lyrics and the visuals perfectly. It shows more of their relationship without any dialogue or exposition, allowing the visuals and the narration of Pear Butter singing to speak for themselves. And the legacy they leave behind? Their wedding vows that grew into an apple tree and a pear tree intertwined between fields of other apple and pear trees, symbolizes how their love helped bring the two families together in some way by the end, and how it gave life to 3 wonderful children. It's a beautiful ending for this story, and the best way they could have possibly wrapped it up. They even managed to fit in an incredible attention to detail. They remembered how Mayor's hair color was actually pinkish, and they had Princess Luna on the moon during the wedding. And little things like Big Mac's curiosity over wanting to hear more stories about his father has a touching sentiment to it. If you want to nitpick, there are some things that you can joke about, like how the hell did they get to Goldie's house so easily if their last trip there was a family vacation from hell? Or how exactly names work if their whole names can change when they get married, or even how Mayor said husband and wife instead of Mare and Colt. But in the end, they don't really matter because of how minuscule they feel compared to the grand scale of the story and its themes. I just don't know what to say, folks. I just can't express enough about how much I adore this episode. Not just as an episode of MLP, but as a story in general. And I think what does help to make the episode stronger is because it aired so late into the series. 7 seasons of getting to know these characters makes it so much more meaningful to get to learn more about them. There is so much raw emotion flowing in this one that it's difficult to truly describe how grateful I am to Joanna Lewis and Kristen Sonko for putting so much thoughtfulness and care into this story. Without a doubt, The Perfect Pair is a masterpiece. The story is perfect, the pacing is perfect, the characters are perfect, the song is perfect, the music is perfect, the ending is perfect. There's just almost no other word to describe the perfect pair. It's just a perfect episode. It is easily one of the most meaningful, impressive, and intelligently written stories in the series. Top 3 easily. I can actually see Sketchy the Changeling and Digibro crying their eyes out over how beautiful this one is. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend that you do. It is an episode that should not be missed under any circumstances. It's an episode that I'll surely come back to a million times over. MisAnthro Pony, over and out.